So now we will transition into our second section, and I'm going to actually call this one emotional hygiene, and that's what we're going to concentrate on. Before I do that, I want to give you the overall formula, okay, that we're talking about when I say, we're looking at radical transformation to happiness. The formula is mindfulness leading to compassion, okay? Now, on the way from mindfulness to compassion, we have a few little smaller steps to take. First, we want to take a step which will help us open our hearts to be able to be more compassionate. And then after that, address compassion directly. So indirectly developing compassion and then directly developing compassion. So emotional hygiene is the former. It's the indirect way to help us develop more compassion. So let me explain that. But first, I will explain what is emotional hygiene. Well, the term is borrowed from public health, hygiene, and emotion, obviously from psychology. And it means to clean up our harmful, destructive, negative emotions. Destructive meaning that they destroy our inner peace and sense of well-being. What we're going to do is first be able to recognize our negative, harmful, destructive emotions. And that's where the mindfulness piece comes in. Once we've recognized, then we've got to do something about it. We can't just sit there and do nothing, okay? So then we want to learn some of the techniques or the methods for this transformation. And remember, I've said this before, I'll say it again, we're not suppressing. Because if you suppress your anger, your jealousy, your pride, etc., you don't get rid of it. And what happens is it builds up and it builds up and it builds up until one day it just explodes. So that's not a healthy way to deal with our harmful emotions. So how do we do the transformation? So let's now go to emotional hygiene, and we will talk specifically about the destructive emotion of anger. Now, sometimes people say to me, well, there are times when I want to be angry, when anger is healthy and it helps me, and I say to them, well, give me an example and let's talk about it. And often what we find is that there are times when being strong and even being aggressive and angry can prove your point or get what you want, but then most of the time, if not all the time, shortly thereafter, you say, oh no, did it again. I got angry. So that there may be a short-lived period after anger when you feel, yeah, that was the right thing. I'm glad I did that. But it often morphs into, oh no, I did it again. Maybe feeling guilty or recognizing that it actually wasn't so healthy for you. It raises your blood pressure. It can cause premature heart attack. It can, affect stroke. It can damage your immune system. And I can go on and on with the health deficits with recurrent or chronic anger. We often in medicine call that a type A personality. And that's linked to people with more heart disease, for example, particularly heart attack. And other circulatory issues like stroke, etc. So we know emotionally, it doesn't make us feel good. When you get angry, you don't feel good. You may again feel emboldened for a short period of time, but it doesn't last. Then you kind of, you don't feel well. You don't feel like you're balanced. So what do we do with anger? How can we transform it into its positive opposite? And what is anger's positive opposite? Okay, so anger's positive opposite is either patience or tolerance, and that can lead actually to compassion. Okay, so let's see how that works. How can we apply mindfulness, that is, become aware of our anger? And then how can we transform it into its healthy opposite, tolerance or patience or even compassion? So anger is something that when you are fully into the anger and you're screaming and pulling your hair out, or what we usually do is, we don't do that. We don't act out that way. We may, but usually we just feel like screaming or pulling our hair out, okay? When you get to that point, it's very difficult to work with it. It just consumes you. So it's very difficult to be reflective and to apply some methods. So that means to work with anger, we have to recognize it early, okay? So what does early anger look like? Take a moment and just think of your own experience. Think of the last time you got angry, maybe today or yesterday or whenever it was, and see if you can remember what was happening to you, just before, in the minutes or maybe even hours before you got angry. What was happening to you physiologically in your body? What was happening to your thoughts? What was happening to your emotions or your feelings or even your mood? So take a moment and see if you can identify your early signs and symptoms of anger. So many of the signs and symptoms of early signs and symptoms of anger are common. They may not always occur. And some of them may be, not everybody does, just some groups, have this or that. But let me go over some of the common pre-anger signs and symptoms before you get red hot. Often there's a sense of irritability or frustration. There may be sleep deprivation. You didn't sleep very much, the night before. It may be that you didn't eat all day and your blood sugar is dropped. It may be you're a little tremulous, you're shaking a little bit, which is not normal for you. You may notice your heart going a little faster and maybe pounding, boom, 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 boom. Or your breathing may be going a little faster than normal. You may notice that you get a little flushed or even a little sweaty or red in the face. Many people notice some tension in parts of their body, maybe their jaw, their neck, their shoulder muscles are tense, or other places in the body are tense, or you may be feeling tense. So those are some of the early signs and symptoms. So when you start developing your mindfulness, look inside sometimes, just mentally stop for a moment, be in the present moment, look inside. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Doesn't take long, just seconds often. And if you identify something that's harmful, then you can work with it. Okay, so how do we work with, let's say we've identified, we feel some tension in our body, in our kind of mind, we feel tense, that the emotion or feeling is tension. And we notice also that we're a little irritable, our fuse is shorter, more easy to become angry. If we notice those things, then tell yourself, I might be becoming angry, and then apply a method. So let me give you a couple methods. I've mentioned these briefly a couple weeks ago when we had our virtual dinner presentation at the Center for Practical Bioethics. But let me review them and give you a little more detail. So you can imagine that pre-anger stuff becomes a cloud. It's all imagination. And that cloud's over there in the sky, it's drifting, and then it completely dissipates along with your pre-anger stuff, okay? Now, this won't work first time, sorry. Why? Well, we are so habituated to anger. It's so deeply ingrained for most of us since our childhood, maybe even early childhood, that we're not going to change that deeply ingrained habit overnight. But if you are persistent, if you don't give up and you keep applying this method again and again, and I'll give you a couple other methods, you can rotate them, find which works best for you, or, you don't have to stay with the same one. But as long as you use one of these methods again and again, it will work. It will help you reduce the intensity. It will lengthen the duration between getting angry, and eventually get you to a place where you rarely, if ever, get angry. I can say honestly, I rarely get angry. I do, but it's rare. And if it happens, it's usually not very intense. It doesn't last long. So it does help. And there are many people that can, say the same thing, that this has helped in their lives. Second method, for once we recognize through our mindfulness early signs of anger and told ourselves, I might be getting angry. The second method is also imagination. You imagine that pre-anger stuff becomes a crystal ball, which you hold your palm, right, in your hand, and you drop it onto a hard floor, stone, cement, a hard floor, and it shatters into lots of pieces along with your pre-anger. Because you remember when you visualize the cloud, or in this second example, the second method, a crystal ball, you imagine that that is, the embodiment, if you will, of your pre-anger stuff, your thoughts and feelings, and your bodily sensations. Good. I'll give you a third method. And this one is more not imagination. Well, there's a little bit of kind of imagination, but it's more of understanding where the other person's coming from. Okay. When we get angry, if it's with another person, and often it is, it may just be solo. I'm getting angry at me, myself. But if it's with another person, remember that that other person's not happy. We may think they're provoking us to get angry, but in reality, usually it's a two-way street. We've done something to provoke them also. Not always, but often. So right away, I know the other person's not happy. And that's what I say to myself. I say to myself, the other person's not happy. Why? Because people that provoke, they're not happy. Okay? Think about it. When you're provoking others, you're a little bit off. You're a little bit upset, about something. You're not happy. Okay. So I know right away the other person's not happy. And then I say to myself, well, why? Why are they not happy? Almost always I don't know. Even if it's someone I know well, I may not know what's been going on with them, for the last hour or 5 minutes, So then I say to myself, well, what are the big things that make people unhappy? Yeah. Well, relationship stuff. All of us got thrown off, and some words are said that are misinterpreted. Or, someone's not feeling well and they say some words that they want to take back, and they say they're sorry, but still it kind of sticks. Okay. Or, some problems in relationship, any kind of problems in relationship. These are common, any kind of relationship. They can make us, that makes, one feel unhappy. So maybe this other person was having some kind of relationship issues that made them feel unhappy. And then they got maybe a little bit provocative, and we sort of matched them or something that was leading towards us getting angry. Okay. Second, issues around health. I've been coughing a little bit. Do I have COVID? Gosh, I hope not. My grandmother, she died from it. Am I going to die? Do I have COVID and am I going to die? And you start going in this loop of fear, okay, about your health. Or you went to see the doctor and, you were just in for your regular checkup, and the doctor did a bunch of tests, and you go back and see the doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, I'm really happy. Everything came out well, except this and this. And I want you to get these further tests to see what's going on here. And you think, oh no, I must have cancer. I'm going to die before the year is up or before the month is up. All these thoughts of fear. Maybe that happened to the other person. They had an encounter with their doctor and something went in a way that made them fearful they could be very sick. Okay. So third issue is finances. Don't have enough money, particularly during COVID. We've lost our business, we've lost our job, we've lost our income, we've lost our money. We don't have money or enough money to feed our family or to do what we want to do, even virtually. If we want to do some shopping online or ordering food online, we are very much restrained because of our poor financial situation. And that may be playing on their mind, and therefore they are a little provocative and leading to maybe me getting angry, possibly me getting angry. So that's the way I think. Relationship issues the person's experiencing, or health issues or financial issues, but any others that you want to throw in there, go ahead. And so it's a little imagination because I don't know usually what's going on with the other person, but I think of some of the big ones that can get people kind of off, so they can maybe be involved with provoking me, and maybe I'm provoking them too. But so that's what I do. And when you do that, what happens to that pre-anger stuff? Well, it kind of dies on the vine. It needs the spotlight and it's not getting it. So it withers. Notice we have not suppressed it, but it just kind of withers because it hasn't had the spotlight. Again, this method, like the others, won't work the first time. Very good. Let me stop here and see if we have any questions. Ryan or Matthew, please.
We've had a couple questions sort of kind of around a theme. And I'm going to see if I can maybe wrangle them up together. The big one that I'm seeing, like the big theme that I'm seeing here with these questions, is this sort of talking about a particular type of anger that comes from witnessing injustice, or anger that comes from being like disappointed when things go poorly, or something like that. Like an anger that maybe could be described as righteous, right? Like an anger that comes from wanting better or wanting good for someone, something like that. And maybe a little bit of dissonance with this idea of transforming a feeling like that into patience or tolerance. Like I mean, personally, I don't feel like I should be patient with injustice or something like that, right? And if you could just speak a little bit to that, that would be helpful.
Sure, it's a great question. I mean, all your questions are great. This one's also great. Yes, so fighting injustice is part of compassion, and we can get firm, just like you can with maybe a child that's, you've tried the peaceful methods and they're not responding. Obviously, you don't beat or hurt or hit the child, but you sometimes need to be firm because it's in their best interests. Same way with compassion. Sometimes it's tough love. So you don't, it's not always a weakness, a kind of a impotent sort of stance. Sometimes it's very tough, but inside we don't have anger. That firmness comes from, compassion, knowing that this is going to be the best for all parties, the person that's been treated unjustly, but also for the perpetrator, because that person needs to get some education so that he or she can, stop those bad habits of harming others and also harming themselves.
Yeah, and this seems, I mean, like a lot of kind of the way that you're talking about this seems to be like localized, like specific interactions with like other people you can see, as opposed to like feeling toward kind of like a big situation or a systemic failure or something like that, something big and out in the world. There's some concern in some of these questions about sort of like about whether, or like how to avoid specifically just becoming numb to it, like that anger sort of, like if you let go of the anger, like a numbness can come in, right? And like that doesn't really feel right either.
I agree. I don't think it feels right to me either. What I would try to do is be active. Now, during COVID, our movements are limited, but we have the internet. I would be active in trying to, fight the particular injustice that you're encountering or you're reading about or, you're concerned about. I mean, it's happening all over the place, in our country and in many places in the world. And so to try to be somewhat actively involved with fighting it. Now, when I say fighting it, I don't mean through violence or anger, but being firm and putting out ideas that, that this is not right and that how this can be, altered, how it can be changed and what we can do about it. I give a lot of money to, Equal Justice Initiative, to the NAACP, their Legal and Education Fund, because these are groups that fight injustice. And so I support them. I also try to get involved. Sometimes I teach in high schools where the issue is bullying. and I meet with all the different factions. I meet with the students, I meet with the parents and the teachers and the administrators, and try to sort these things out, and listen, be an active, non-judgmental listener in all this, and try to help sort some of these things out. So try to be involved. I think that's maybe a better stance than getting numb or just sitting with the anger.
And I have one here, which I think you've answered partially, but there's a second part that I think is worth visiting that says, can anger ever be good? Can it tell us something is wrong or unjust? How do we discern if there is something to listen to in the anger, or when it is just something that we should try to dissipate?
Yeah, again, wonderful. I think these issues of injustice, if we're observing injustice, or bullying, I mean, all these things where someone's being taken advantage of unfairly, I think that we want to try to, keep that firm determination without the anger. So that may be a little difficult. So anger sometimes can be revenge, or I want to get back at this person, or I wish bad things on that person, that kind of stuff. We don't need. That's not healthy. That doesn't help the situation. So we can try to let go of those kind of thoughts of revenge, or of wishing harm on others, and substitute it for engagement, to try to help that process of reducing inequities and injustice we see all around us. So to keep that kind of passion and that sort of firmness and that sort of enthusiasm, maybe that's not the best word, enthusiasm, but that that passion, to do something about it. We're not going to be able to solve it, but we can do little things. And so try to get involved and engage with doing some of those little things that, can be helpful.
And I've got one here that says, what about being blindsided by anger? So no pre-anger, because things just blow up so suddenly.
Yeah. That occasionally happens to me, although I'm not sure I can remember the last time, but yeah. You do the best you can. If you can't work with it, if it's too, once it hits, it's too, strong, you can't work with it, then just kind of tell yourself, okay, next time I'm going to be on the lookout. Also, make sure that you didn't miss the pre-anger stuff. It may be that it was there and you just were not mindful. And also look out for places, people, situations where you're more prone for anger. Like you didn't sleep well, or this is a particular person, or this is a particular issue that's being raised, and maybe it feels like they're rubbing it in my nose, that kind of stuff. Any situations, people, places, whatever, then be on the real lookout that, I better be careful because I may well get angry in this kind of situation. That's also a little helpful to prevent being blindsided.
And I've got one more here that just rolled in that says, if you have a more sensitive temperament, is it just about having a longer path towards diminishing anger?
Good question again. Maybe not. If that sensitivity has some patience or tolerance in it, which is again the opposite of anger, then I would say that that's healthy stuff. I think it depends on the person. And again, we don't want to be suppressing the anger, make sure we're not suppressing it. So if those things look pretty good from non-suppression and some tolerance or patience, then I think that's very healthy.
I think that covers the ones we've got right now. There's something that I kind of am interested in asking. It seems a little bit like part of our definitions here is that, like, maybe the that anger, the thing to be dissipated, is or transformed, I guess is the word, is sort of not. You would say that fundamentally it is separate from kind of the impulse to try and change something, because it seems like they can get really wrapped up, right? Like even in terms of like revenge or something, to sort of like change, you have this impulse to try and change the world in a certain way, right? And it's like you would want to separate these two things. One is this kind of this violent component, and one is this maybe like that's where I think this kind of like this righteousness comes in, right? This sort of like if you have a system that you think needs changing, or something like that, you would want to figure out how to tease these things apart. Am I understanding it correctly that this kind of that you would say that anger is bracketing, like the notion is bracketing kind of just the negative part that you're wanting to get away or get rid of?
The answer is yes. So obviously life is complicated, and these categories we're talking about aren't always so perfectly clean. There's overlap. You know, having a sense of revenge that motivates you to change a system which you think is hurting people, I think is very healthy. I would not act on the revenge, but
of course,
just
yeah,
see it in that capacity. And I think that's, if it helps you that way, I think that's very, positive. This whole thing is a very practical kind of system. It's to bring more happiness for ourselves and others. And if others are being harmed, and
right,
we have some ways that might be able to help the situation through some little change in the system, for example, then I think that's wonderful stuff. I mean, that's all helpful rather than harmful. And again, compassion isn't weakness. We can be real tough. So let me give you a couple examples. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was full of compassion. He was not an angry man, and yet he accomplished a tremendous amount. He was incredibly courageous, gave his life for the cause. And his cause, he said, were not just for African Americans, but for all people. He said that many times. Of course, he worked primarily in the Black community because those were the people most being oppressed and are most being oppressed. There are other minorities and other people being oppressed also, of course. But the other person is Mahatma Gandhi, a little guy, spent a lot of his life in jail, in South African jails, He was tough as nails, but no anger. He basically almost one-handedly kicked out the British who had been in his country for 300 years in India. Look at Saint Mother Teresa, this tiny little lady from Albania, this nun who was canonized after she passed. And she went into the streets of Calcutta and lifted people who were dying and emaciated, living in their, sitting or lying in their excrement. She'd pick them up, take them to the Sisters of Charity, and she with her other nuns would clean them, clothe them, bathe them, clean them, clothe them, feed them, and give them tremendous love. Now, there's been some stuff written that she was trying to maybe convert Hindus to Catholicism. I don't know, but maybe there was some of that. But if you look at the big picture, she was incredibly compassionate and a tough, tough woman. You look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama, same thing. He lost his country. He was barely, he was in his teenage years. And then in his early 20s had to leave to save his life because of the Chinese military occupation of Tibet. This man has no anger, but he is tough. He is courageous. So there are many examples of compassion of people alive or some no longer alive, where they were strong and tough fighting injustice, but not with violence or anger.
And I have one question that just rolled in. I think it's a really good one. As we've talked a lot about anger and transformation of anger, but I have a question here that says, is sadness a negative feeling that should be dissipated or transformed?
Yeah, very good question. I don't usually include that because, there are many reasons or variations of sadness. So it's a rubric covering many different types. If it's grief from loss, it's healthy to go through that, to try to work with it, not to suppress it. If it's sadness at seeing another person or your own person or your own loved ones who are suffering, then, that can be very healthy because it can motivate us to practice compassion, to practice love. So I think in general, it's not one we want to, try to transform, but rather use it to morph us into compassion using that sadness.
Well, and that brings us to 10 past the hour. We had talked about taking another little break here. Do we want to do that, or is there anything else you'd like to cover first?
Let me say, I think what we'll do is not take this little break now. Okay. I mentioned jealousy. Let me say a few things about transforming jealousy, and then we can go into our next section, okay. Which will be compassion. So jealousy is different than anger in that it is often under the radar. Sometimes we notice we are jealous, but a lot of the time we don't notice it. But it affects us. It closes us. It makes us more constricted. We feel less balanced, less relaxed, less happy. Jealousy is harmful to our own well-being and sense of joy and happiness. If it is under the radar, it means that it's not just early recognition, as in the case of anger, but it's rather recognition, okay? And that's where mindfulness plays an important role. Every so often, just take a moment, check in, like right now, I want you to check in. What are you thinking or feeling? Go ahead. And if you were not able to do that, keep trying. It'll come. It's not so difficult. Just keep trying. So we check in every so often. The more we do it, the better it will be. But without becoming crazy about it, make it comfortable. At first, you probably won't do it so much, but try to make this a habit of checking in. Being in the present, observing your thoughts and your feelings, being mindful in that way with a capital M. And when we do that, we may notice sometimes, I don't feel so well here. What's going on? I'm kind of in a judgmental mode. Negative judgment. Yeah, this is jealousy. I want something not good for the other person. And often behind that is that if they do well, somehow it makes me feel lesser. That's not true, but that's often how we feel when we're jealous. Rather, if we were to get behind the other person's achievement, whatever it may be, and feel happy about it, that is, practice appreciation, it becomes a win-win situation. If we express that to the other person, if we do it skillfully, they're going to feel good. We're also going to feel good. Okay, so it's win-win. So let me give you an example. Someone's sitting in their home and they hear the purr of a beautiful sports car engine. Let's say it's a red convertible Ferrari, and it stops in front of their condominium. They open the blinds and they see this car stopped in front of their neighbor's house just next door. And they immediately say, she doesn't deserve it. I do. She doesn't even know how to drive, let alone a sports car. I do. She hasn't really wanted this thing. She just bought it on a lark, on a spur of the moment. I've been wanting such a car for a long time. And then slams the curtain shut, goes, makes dinner, loses his appetite, goes to sleep and can't fall asleep, and finally does fall asleep and wakes up in the middle of the night. Okay? That's jealousy. Scenario number 2. Person on the other side hears the same beautiful sports car engine from that red convertible Ferrari stop in front of the neighbor's house, opens the blinds, and immediately smiles and said, wow, what a beautiful car. She must be so happy. I'm going to go congratulate her. wow, what a beautiful car. You must be so happy. I'm happy for you. And she says, yes, it's something I've actually wanted for a long time. I haven't talked about it. It's something that I've researched. I've even taken some lessons how to drive a sports car, and now I have it. I'm so happy. And I was thinking of taking it out for a spin. And then she says, would you like to join me? And he can hardly blurt out the words, yes. He's so excited. So he goes, and they drive down, the main sort of boulevard through downtown Kansas City, and with the top down in this red Ferrari convertible sports car, so everybody can see. And then at some point, she pulls the car off and stops by the side and says to him, would you like to drive? And again, he can hardly blurt out. He's so excited. Yes. And then he drives slowly down the main Kansas City boulevard so everybody can see. And then they go home. He goes to his home, makes his dinner, enjoys it thoroughly, goes to sleep and sleeps like a baby. That's the practice of appreciation. So if we can recognize jealousy, so it's dependent on recognition, then we have the option. And then 50% of the battle is already won, because then we can tell ourselves, okay, am I going to go in my traditional way, familiar way of practicing jealousy where I don't feel so well, or am I going to practice appreciation? So we have a choice. And then if we practice appreciation, we're going to feel much better, and maybe the other person will also. Good. So I just wanted to give a little, give a method, a way to work with jealousy to transform it into appreciation.